So Keir Starmer spoke to The Observer for a profile piece, but within it, he attacked Green Party leader Zach Polanski. Now, if you're going to make political attacks, at least base it in truth. Instead, he misrepresents their policy and calls them dangerous. They're anti-NATO at a time when the world is more volatile than it has ever been. The Green Party thinks it's all right to sell drugs and there should be no restrictions. So somebody could sell drugs outside my children's school, but if you're a landlord, it should be unlawful. That's nuts. They're dangerous. So let's start with the NATO stuff. It all began during the Green Party leadership election. Zach did an interview with the Byline Times, and right at the end of the interview, they asked him if there was one policy he would change about the Greens. He said he'd like to look at NATO and in the future leave, but replace it with a European alliance because we can't trust Trump. And it's right, we can't trust Donald Trump. Now, it wasn't a big statement or some big announcement. He just answered the question thinking, it's not going to be a big deal, and Byline Times ran it as their headline. So, of course, the NATO discord began, which, to be honest, hasn't been a bad thing. It's good to debate and discuss everything. But that's his position. We can't rely on Donald Trump. And given how the US announced that they wouldn't help Europe in a hypothetical scenario where Russia invaded another European nation, Zach isn't wrong. Now, he never claimed to want to unilaterally leave, but to have a different form of alliance, which to me is completely sensible. But this is politics, and when you have nothing to offer, you need to make bad faith attacks, which is what Starmer is doing. But it's an attack which could work. I mean, most smears and bad faith arguments don't tend to work, but when it comes to national security, people take that seriously. The overwhelming majority of people support staying in NATO, so they could be put off by a political party talking about leaving it. I mean, the recent links between Reform and Russia is, I think, stifling the party. Their support has been flatlining, and the Russia stuff really isn't helping them. So if the political establishment manages to convince people that the Greens are somehow pro-Russia, it could stick, which is why I think it's important we have to call out the bullshit. And ironically, the person who has been the strongest on attacking Reform with the Nathan Gill Russian bribery story is Zach Polanski. The next attack, drugs. Starmer is taking the same line as Steve Reed, the DEFRA minister, where they lie about their policy on drugs and then compare it to banning landlords, which also isn't their landlord policy. And the Greens, and not just them, drug reform campaigners, because I want to make this wider than the Greens, because it's not their party policy. It's not the policy that they came up with even. It's them listening to experts and people who want drug reform, because these ideas have been around for years. The idea is decriminalization of all drugs, because it's a health issue, not a criminal one. This doesn't make it legal to sell drugs. It doesn't promote selling drugs. What it does do is treat many people who are addicted to drugs as a victim. So if you're caught with possession of drugs and it's clear the quantity is a small amount, small enough for personal consumption and not to sell it on, you don't get in trouble. Instead of, in some cases, locking people up. The point is the state needs to step in and try and help these people to get clean. Now, currently, we treat those who are addicted like trash on the street. We just do. And treating them as criminals doesn't tackle the root issue. It doesn't get people off drugs, and it doesn't make society safer. I mean, no one feels safe if you have a group of people who are high and volatile on the street. Yet if we continue our policy, which we are doing, it won't change. We could make our streets safer and protect those who have gone down the road of addiction by treating this as a health issue and helping these people. Now, the next part of their policy is legalization. Now, what does that look like? Well, decriminalization only goes so far. Decriminalization can help victims, but it does nothing about the drug market. It doesn't fundamentally change society's relationship with drugs. Decriminalization is the first step, but it's not a complete policy. Now, when people hear the word legalization, often they have a picture in their mind of what Starmer is describing. Now, anti-drug reform people deliberately put that image in your head. Legalization doesn't mean you can sell drugs outside the Prime Minister's kid's school or do it in front of a police officer. No, that's absurd. It's the same as alcohol. Now, many of you will already know about the alcohol prohibition period. The government saw alcohol as dangerous because it is. It's a poison. But they took the roots of what we do with drugs today and ban it. Now, did it work? No. People were consuming off-label stuff, making their own. People died. It didn't stop people. They just moved underground. It's where we get speakeasy bars from. Now, the government recognized that people will consume alcohol whether you like it or not. So instead of driving people underground and creating a black market, you legalize it, you tax it, and you regulate it. How many people go to the black market for alcohol now? Zero, because it virtually doesn't exist. Why would people get dangerous, dodgy alcohol, not knowing what's in it, when they could go to the pub or get very cheap drinks from the supermarket? And that's the point. Fighting fire with fire doesn't always work. Sometimes you need to be smart. And it's simply the same logic. Think of Amsterdam. Weed is legal and many other drugs are too. No one's consuming it in a dodgy way in the alleyway, right? There are dedicated, safe and regulated areas where you consume it. Now, does that mean you can pick up a bag of Coke from the supermarket in this world with drug legalization? Very doubtful. I mean, you can abolish the black market without making it too easy to obtain. But the point isn't to make it too difficult either. You want people to choose the regulated path. And of course, the extra tax revenue can then be spent on addiction services, for example. It's also a long-term strategy. It's not day one, all drugs are legal. No, but it's recognizing that the war on drugs doesn't work. And guess what? No one believes it does. So what's the point in doing a huge drug bust up that makes headlines only for hours later, the black market changes up and drugs are still being sold? It's about being an adult and understanding that people should be able to put whatever they want in their own bodies. And instead of stopping an inevitability, we provide a cleaner, safer way of doing it for the good of everyone. Then Starmer says, and again, Steve Reed did the same thing, which is to contrast, oh, you can sell drugs legally, but it's illegal to rent out an apartment under Green Party policy. That's insane. But I love this line because Starmer seems to think one is way more moral than the other. Well, if you've rented, I'm sure you probably think your landlord is worse than a drug dealer. Now, one is selling drugs, bad. The other is causing a housing crisis so you can pay off their mortgage and keep their assets nice and clean for when they sell for a huge profit and you get none of it. But guess what? You tell them thank you anyway. I mean, who's worse? Now, obviously, we've been over the abolish landlord Green Party policy before. It's not abolishing them overnight, but rather it's having a housing policy pre-Thatcher where there isn't much of an incentive to be a landlord in the first place. But once again, this is all the Labour Party and Keir Starmer has. They can't debate policy because their policies are worse. They can't honestly frame the Green Party's policies because when you frame it in an honest way, it makes way more sense. So instead, they have to come up with ridiculous lines like, they're going to sell drugs out of my kid's school. It's pathetic and completely dishonest.